we're going to be finishing up our entire year, really, actually, with the Harlem Renaissance. Clearly, there was more stuff beyond this that we just haven't had a chance to get to. We didn't talk about modern drama, and man, there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about there. Just didn't get to. But we're going to finish up with Harlem Renaissance. I think is a good one to end with in regards to kind of bookending the year in content. So let's first off just kind of be looking at the visual here. So we have this picture, hails from the Harlem Renaissance, and the question I have here is, how does the artist use symbolism to describe the Renaissance? And if we look at some of the images in this picture, we've got, right off the bat, this kind of target, right? This circle. And if you look at the center of the circle, we have the Statue of Liberty, right? And we have this guy who's standing on a wheel or cog and holding up a saxophone. So there's obviously that element of the arts, as he's kind of standing up and reaching out among the buildings and the industrial areas going on here. And then we have this guy who seems to be hailing other people, right? He's holding a briefcase. So he's, a worker calling other people to work, and he's running up these stairs. And then we have these images of hands also on either side that seem to be kind of reaching towards them, like they're running off and running away from that, knowing that, and speaking of their kind of social situations, they understand that there are those attempting to hold them back or hinder their progress. So there's a lot of symbolism going on in this, and we're going to see a great deal of that showing up in the poetry as well. So with that said, let's kind of talk about the Harlem as a location and how that's fitting. So here we have New York, the Bronx, Queens, and so on. Harlem is a neighborhood in New York City, and again was a center of African American political, cultural, and artistic movement in the 1920s. And right, and 30s. So here we go. Now, if we're looking at kind of the more specific area, and you can go there now and see all this, we see a lot of specific examples of how this is an African American community, noticing the name of the streets, right? So we have Malcolm X Boulevard, Frederick Douglass. Who else do we have? Clayton Powell. Let's see, is there anything else? Of course there is. Yeah, but so a number of those names that indicate that what we're looking at here is an African American community, as those are kind of champions of that group. So this kind of gives you a visual of how Harlem itself grew through those 20 plus years. So on the outset in 1911, we just have this very small kind of block of small community. And then by 1920, that had grown to this larger size here. And then by 1930, it had broadened out all the way into this section, kind of as it hugs the Harlem River. We've got Grant's Tomb on the west side there. And then Lexington Avenue, for the most part, is kind of the cutoff there until Central Park on the south side. So it continued to grow through that time, and a bunch of other stuff was going on as well, as we'll kind of look at. So in the 1930s, here's some visuals that we got going on. As you can see, it's a very vibrant place. Okay, a lot of people out in the streets. It was a safe place to be, relatively clean also. We're not looking at slums. No one's busy running around, with their heads down, worried about crime and so on. And kids are out and interacting. And yes, there were white communities around that also interacted with them during this time period, as they were access to stores and so on. So some of the causes of the Harlem Renaissance and the movement there, considering that this is post World War I, okay, so there was an economic boom that occurred as a result of that, and this sense of community and spirit that America had. And then you also have this shift from rural areas in the South and urban areas, both north and south. And there are some push factors and pull factors. So push factors, Um, Quite obviously, racism was an issue in the South that pushed people up, and then the factories and the booms that happened in New York were a factor in pulling people because there were jobs, and as more people moved up, there were communities that were welcoming and safe, and opportunities that allowed for that. So it was incentivizing in some ways for people to make that. More on that as we go. Right, and there you go. Every family has that one. Just found it funny. There's this hand in the corner. Anyway, don't let that be you. So, growing African middle class also helped with this. So, the developed a result of improved educational and employment opportunities for African Americans. Uh, some of this, quite frankly, I think was, everybody was kind of upwardly mobile at this time period, and it also gave the African American community an opportunity also, and just between universities and that mobility and factories, they were able to improve their standard of living and move up to some degree to a middle class level. And we even see that addressed in Great Gatsby, right, with the African American family that they see on the bridge into the city. So there are opportunities. And yes, there is still a great deal of racism. There still is a great deal of prejudice and segregation um, in some capacity. But at least in the North, it's not as bad. And if you play the game right, so to speak, you can still make some progress. So, so here we go. A couple of other causes that brought about the Harlem Renaissance political agenda for civil rights by African Americans. So leaders such as W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and the NAACP helped to inspire racial pride in the middle and working class. So Du Bois, author of Souls of Black Folk, was instrumental in the foundation of the NAACP. Now, to make this clear, Du Bois felt that there really was only a subset of black folks, and about 10% that really were necessarily to be educated, and were going to be the leadership of their cultural movements and so on, and the rest of them were just going to go to work. And some of that was practicality, some of that was also just looking at the state and historical context of that community. Now, Marcus Garvey pushed for the Back to Africa movement. So these guys kind of sit on different things. So from the standpoint of Du Bois, he wanted to create a distinct African American culture that was its own cultural group, distinct from the white Americans. Then you have Marcus Garvey, who was just like, we don't belong here. No one actually, no one signed up for this. We should go back to our own countries and make a country of our own, or develop our own national identities in our own environment, because we're never going to be able to do it here. We're always going to be under somebody else's cultural value systems. So they came from a very different standpoint. So here we go with Du Bois' talented 10th. So a small percentage of African American population were exceptionally skilled, and that the talented 10th should be the ones that we cultivate to ultimately be the leadership. Now, if you think that sounds weird in a way when you look at economic disparities in our country, it's probably even smaller than that. There's a very, in even businesses, there's even smaller number of people or businesses that really are dictating the progress and cultural values that we have. So yeah, there's some weird stuff. So Du Bois' influence on literature, we're going to see a couple of these poems. So we're just going to read through them, kind of get a conversation what's going on. So from Langston Hughes, we have The Negro Speaks of Rivers, where he says, I know rivers, ancient as the world, and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turned all golden in the sunset. I know rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like rivers. So in Langston Hughes' poem, the speaking of rivers, rivers are oftentimes a divide, a separation. And when we looked at the slave songs, river was always a barrier to freedom, and most of the rivers that he speaks of are ones that connect them to the earth, connect them to history, connect them to the world. And in a way, Langston Hughes is evoking this heritage of the African community that they have throughout the world, and of rivers and of places that uh, are lush and fruitful, and that they've always been a part of that, um, and that their soul has grown deep like rivers through their challenges and through their contributions. And then we have County Cullen. This one's a little bit different and a little bit more modern, and it's called Incident. Pardon a little bit of the language here, but it is appropriate for the context. Once riding in old Baltimore, heart filled, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. So County Cullen is again expressing this feeling, this emotion, where this incident of racism that he experienced with a young boy, you know, in his youth, when he could run around and play and didn't really have any cares in the world, and yet he experiences this bit of racism, and it's the only thing that truly stuck with him. Right, from May until December, and the impact that racism has. And again, this is a micro experience to the holistic one. County Cullen is insisting that we look beyond uh, the singular incident a young boy has, but the cultivation of what that did, the seed that it planted, the memory that it made, and that when we're looking at holistically the entire African American community, every single one of them has this. It is born. It is bred through uh, their culture at this point in time, and their experiences, and it has that long term effect. So he's looking beyond just again a singular incident. So um, this this attempt to define and um, uh, to communicate the experience of the African American community in a way can be looked at as a propaganda, as a way of eliciting empathy and understanding, and to also bring up that community, and like the context of Langston Hughes' poem, to give them a heritage that has otherwise been denied to them. And we see this played out a couple of different ways, or at least the resistance to this. So the 369 Tell fighters were awarded the Croix de Guerre um, for gallantry in battle and returned to the U.S. as heroes of African Americans. Although the French recognized the courage and skill of the regiment, the U.S. government downplayed their role and even tried to convince the French to do the same. We must not eat with them, shake hands, or seek to talk or meet with them outside of the requirements of military duty. We must not commend too highly the black troops. And this was an excerpt from a memorandum entitled Secret Information Concerning the Black American Troops. And there was this concern that if we lauded them and gave them, their due credit for the contributions and efforts they made, they would want an increasing role. And again, this is a human nature thing, and it also is obviously an issue that America has struggled with, this idea of letting go of power and control and the status quo. And that was something very, very, um, very, very clear, right? So, how do you think the American public will treat African American soldiers upon their return? Obviously, they were treated just like, all right, go back to work now. And the sacrifices and contributions they made were broadly overlooked, or at least very much downplayed. So Among other issues that drew people up to the Harlem area, in response to those gains by African Americans, many whites fought back during the summer of 1919. There were 25 major race riots, and at least 83 Americans were lynched. Ku Klux Klan held over 200 meetings to increase enrollment. You also had, again, lynchings, which were a very public thing. I was not willing to put some imagery on there for that. But these things obviously scared African Americans. So when they're going up to the north, they're just looking for a place where they're not going to be lynched just because they've made progress and suddenly their house looks nicer, or they're moving up in the world and they're gaining some sort of, social um, say or power. Now, Claude McKay memorialized the bloody summer of 1909 with the poem "If We Must Die," and yet again another kind of call to people. And it says, "If we must die, let us not be like dogs, hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their thousand blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Let men will face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fight back." So this sonnet by Claude McKay here, okay, it is a call. Let us die with nobility. Let us not, cower from this. Let us not give in to them. Okay, let us not be like hogs hunted and penned in an inglorious spot. Let us nobly die. Let us meet the common foe. Let's fight back. Okay, show brave, right, and be numbered. So this is a nebulous call. Some may perceive it as being one of physicality, violence with violence. Others with, protection and just don't back down. Somebody throws a brick through your window, you're not leaving. Sorry. Don't be intimidated away, but continue to progress. Okay. So Harlem section of New York also just kind of look at this. Before they showed up in the early 20th century, earlier, was quite a mess. And then as they showed up and they cultivated and took responsibility for that section of the city, it became a nicer place. And they brought money and progress as that was allowed essentially in that neck of the woods. And they did not have the hindrance of that racism and that prejudice quite as much. And they were left to their own devices, and they were able to progress. Now, blacks view surge in art, music, and literature as a creation of a new cultural identity, and that was part of what they were doing. Whites see it as another new, exotic, and trendy form of entertainment. Now, what's good, better, or worse about that is because whites accepted this and found it nouveau and found it interesting, and jazz was this cool new hip, sound. It was accepted and allowed to thrive, and this gave the black community some fuel to continue cultivating those things and feel a sense of their own cultural pride. And as modern artists looked to make it new, they turned to African, and cut off that detail, whatever, to African American paintings and to this kind of tribalistic look, this more primitive sort of artistry. So we see the modernist trend towards primitivism impact this through the visuals. Now, there are some differences also in artistic vision and the purpose of this. So thus, all art is propaganda and ever must be, despite the wailing of the pursuits. And again, that's Du Bois. And then we have Locke's, which is the great social gain in this is the releasing of our talented group from the arid fields of controversy and debate to the productive fields of creative expression. So Locke's perspective was that we were meant to create, and so we now get to do that and demonstrate what we've always been able to do, the potential that has always existed that's been oppressed in us. And that creativity and that expression, out of that expression will come healing, and will come equality, and will come acceptance. Whereas Du Bois found that it was a necessary propaganda tool, and that our art and so on should be directly addressing and expressing. So in that sense, it was much more of like a social justice exercise. Whereas Hughes and Hurston said, we younger Negro artists who create now intend to express our individual dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. If white people are pleased, we are glad. If they're not, it doesn't matter. We know we are beautiful and ugly too. So their attitudes were more or less that expression happened for the sake of itself. Okay. So then we have this question of, is it more important to fight racial prejudice and stereotyping or true personal expression? And obviously in this particular time, we have both. So let's look at these real quick. And I'll do my best to kind of wrap this all up for you. We have 3 poems to look at, so I'll look at one. That's County Cullen. So we'll start with him. We shall not always plant while others reap the golden increment of bursting fruit, not always countenance abject and mute, that lesser men should hold their brothers cheap, not everlastingly while others sleep. Shall we beguile their limbs with mellow flute, not always bend to some more subtle brute? We were not made to eternally weep. The night whose sable breast relieves the stark, while stars is no less lovely being dark, white stars, is no less lovely being dark, and there are buds that cannot bloom at all, in light, but crumple, piteous, and fall. So in the dark we hide the heart that bleeds, and wait and tend our agonizing seeds. So County Cullen makes this statement in this, right? That we will not always plant while others reap. There will be a time where we will be able to actually bear fruit from the efforts we make. But it is this call, right, to continue to work and to cultivate, even under oppression that we experience continually, and that we will not always be, cowering away from the enemy, but someday we'll bloom and develop our own our own place in the society, our own contributions in the society. So this one, I'm forgetting again. It's called From the Dark Tower. And that one's on page 802, by the way, if you wanted to look at that closer. And then we have Langston Hughes, I Too. And I wanted to throw this one out because, well, welcome again to another example of, Whitman's influence. And in this poem, Langston Hughes directly is addressing Whitman's poem, America. I hear America singing. So here we go. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen, then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Now Langston Hughes is, taking from Whitman's poem here, and including himself in that, adding the African American role to it, saying we are part of that voice. And so what Langston Hughes here is doing is including the African American community in that chorus that Whitman talks about. Now he's not criticizing Whitman, and he's not saying, hey, Whitman forgot about us. He's reminding people that we're in that as well. All those people that Whitman heard, yeah, that's us too. We're in that. We're part of that voice as well. And while today we may be, we may not be acknowledged, there will be a time. So both County Cullen and Langston Hughes have a rather more positive outlook. Now for our very last poem, I wanted to end on this guy, and there's some stuff to talk about this. So it's a longer one. We'll get through it. And I just have a couple final thoughts, and then we'll end on that note. So this one's called Let America Be America Again. It is by Langston Hughes. And no, it is not in reference at all to any political slogans you may have heard in recent times. It's quite a different perspective. So let's read. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer of the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America was never America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love, where never kings connive with no tyrant scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker, soul to the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean. Hungry yet today despite the dream. Beaten yet today. Oh, pioneers! I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker borrowed through the years. Yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream of the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings, in every brick and stone, in every furrow turn, that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I am the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home, for I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shores, and Poland's plain, and England's grassy lea, and torn from black Africa's strand I came to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed, and all the songs we've sung, and all the hopes we've held, and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay, except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free. The land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith in pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me an ugly name you choose, any ugly name you choose, the steel of freedom does not stain. For those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. America! Oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains and the endless plain, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. So that's the end of that poem. I'll leave it, kind of go back onto it, I guess. And I'm just going to address real quick more of the concepts here. He uses obviously a lot of literary devices in this. He's got rhyme scheme. He has enjambment, a lot of references, pioneers and things of that nature. But the sentiment here, that America has never been. In the beginning of the year, we talked about the Puritans and the early folks that came to America and their religious and political and economic motivations, and the idea that was born in Crevecoeur's melting pot. And here we have Langston Hughes, I think a good way to end it, because we're kind of still struggling with this as America, and the identity and the heritage. And what Langston Hughes says here is that America has never really truly lived up to its promise. And yet it has a promise. And yet it has potential. And yet there is something to strive for, which is what makes America a great country. Not what it once was, but what it will or can be. And he has an insistence, as we see in the second half of this poem. He finally says, I say it plain, America never was America to me. It's not in parentheses anymore. It has become something he will say out loud to be true, right? Now, today we have a lot of political stuff going on, obviously, and this sentiment is still around. But one of the things I want to point out, and one of the reasons I kind of wanted to end with this, was that we study American literature to have an understanding of where we are ultimately going in all this, and kind of how America has unfolded. And obviously there's political and historic events that we did not cover here, but from the literary and expression standpoint, I think Langston Hughes does a good job capturing this continual tension that artists and authors have struggled with in America. And as we move forward in your academics and education, hopefully you're able to see kind of that story arc, if you will, and see that we're still in a place where we're struggling and still trying to figure things out. But the question is whether or not we continue to cultivate that dream and progress to a fruition, or we give up on it. And I think Langston Hughes ends with a great idea, and it's this insistence that we will make America again, right, and make it be what it once was, an idea. So there we're going to end it, and that wraps up, and that's a wrap. That's the end of the semester there. So thank you for bearing with this rather lengthy presentation, and yeah, we'll just be wrapping up next week, and that'll be that. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed the poetry of the Harlem Renaissance. Have a great one, guys.